Hello, and welcome back to the Courageous Nerd YouTube channel for another interview. My name is Connor. Joining me today is actor Mark Pellegrino, who you might recognize from series such as Lost, Dexter, Supernatural, or 13 Reasons Why. Also joining me is attorney Andrew Rossow. Together, they'll be discussing their new reality docu-series, The Guardian Project. If you enjoyed this interview or any of the others on the channel, please be sure to like and subscribe. So welcome and thank you for taking the time to do this.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Great. And how have you both been finding life in the pandemic?
Andrew, you want to go first?
Sure. I think there's both good and bad. I think from a positive standpoint, it's provided a lot more discipline in terms of keeping to a schedule, keeping to a routine, which I've always had, but it still forces you to really map out your day and ensure you're staying productive. I'm one that I never liked really working in an office setting. I hate when people come up, banter about, blah, 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 blah. And then you got to think, what was I just doing? So for that perspective, it's helped me. But I think overall, the pandemic has been relatively positive. I feel I've done quite a bit. I've gotten to meet several new people. One of them being Mark and I getting to know each other and coming up with our project. So for me, it's been wonderful. But you look at everyone else, and not everybody appreciates it or approaches it the same way. So.
Yeah, I mean, I feel it's the same mixed bag for me. On the one hand, my income and jobs have been pushed to 2021, at least the foreseeable future, and that's kind of a bummer. I like having a schedule sort of imposed on me from without, that I just sort of function around in. So it's been a challenge for me to make up my own schedule and follow that, but it's also been a creative boon. I wrote a script. I'm working on the outlines for another script. I met Andrew. We've put together this project. I'm putting together a project for the Ayn Rand Institute, helping to produce that, and getting a lot of reading done, and a lot of movie watching in. And to that degree, I think I've been better off. My wife has unfortunately been trapped in Paris since June. So I haven't had the good social effects of being with somebody all the time. That, well, sometimes that can be bad, but but building up intimacy where you couldn't before because you were too busy, traveling or working out of state or something.
Right. And I guess, as you both just alluded to, you're involved with the Guardian Project, a new reality docu-series described as a multi-tiered attack on the epidemic problems of public bullying and the spreading of libelous narratives on social media. So I guess, how did you both come together to work on this?
Sure. Mark, I think you're the best person to start this off.
Well, I've experienced successive waves of online bullying as a check mark in social media. The check isn't just a verification of a celebrity status or being an influencer. It's also a target for many people. And if you're also a check mark that has an opinion that can be controversial, depending on the zeitgeist of the culture, you invite attacks, not on purpose, just by virtue of the fact that you stand out more. And the attackers try to cut you down to size, and they're not always very honest in when they're doing it. You may think you're engaging in a dialogue with somebody to get them to understand your point of view or an attempt to understand theirs, and bring more clarity to the universe. They're just out there to hurt you. So I experienced about 3 successive waves of what I call hoarding, where somebody either picks a fight with you and you take the bait, or they throw something out, they pick a bite. They basically pick a fight with you and you take the bait, and then you get piled on by a semi-organized group of people of like mind, and they isolate you and abuse you until you either quit or or die. That seems to be their goal. And I just got sick and tired of it. And at one point during the third wave, a group of fans started to defend me. They sort of circled the wagons around me and offered proofs that the things that the people within the horde were saying were wrong. And one of the leaders of that group of defenders joked to me that she was my bodyguard, and I said, yeah. And from there, the idea of the Guardians was born. And then Andrew asked me to do a cameo for his anti-bullying site, Cyberbite. I did that, and then he asked me for an interview, which I did, and the post-interview went longer than the interview. We discovered we had a lot of personal dynamics in common, and the same framework with respect to justice and wanting to help victims of these types of assaults. And so the Guardian Project was born out of that.
Yeah, and I think what really helped unite us, and on top of that, is a lot of people don't understand that in type of bullying, trolling, this nihilism, that we would be capable of mirroring that behavior onto others, right? The idea is we couldn't, we don't, we wouldn't. And there are people out there always that will try and spin narratives about anyone who is standing up and using their voice. And that's really what is unfortunately led to this cancel culture that we have, that people have become so afraid of speaking out and standing up for what they believe, that it's isolating. And Mark and I want to create an atmosphere or a community, big or small, for people to be able to do that, but to also humanize their experiences for those out there who still don't believe this is happening, don't believe it's harmful, don't believe that this should be criminalized. And I think we complement each other very well.
Right, and I guess you both kind of again mentioned a little bit about this, but with Mark being an actor and you yourself, Andrew, being from a law background, like how do you think your respective careers affect your work with the Guardian Project?
Well, I think we
question,
combine
Mark.
creative and organizational elements that can really make this project progress. I think we both. I hope I enhance his creativity, and he definitely enhances my organizational ability. And he's a better editor than I am, so I can write stuff and he can hone it to a nice, concise point. And in that respect, the message, I think, gets out there better and clearer than if one of us were just approaching it singly.
Yeah,
What do you think, Andrew?
No, I think you said it perfectly. We complement each other well. There's a lot that Mark has in his network and experience. We come from very different worlds, different backgrounds, where we are able to bring those into our relationship here to give to the bigger cause. And Mark certainly adds to my creativity, and I think there's something that we both learn from each other every day. And as we continue to grow this, we are learning from each other, and we're bouncing ideas off of one another and saying, Mark, who's in your network that, could speak on this, who could be a good resource, and vice versa, with law and media in my realm, those are resources that not everybody comes across every day. But at the same time, looking at Mark as a renowned actor and performer, there are contexts and resources that I wouldn't come across every day. And the ability to recognize what we both know and what we don't know makes us even stronger to deliver to the community that we want this to go to.
Right, for sure. And at least from my understanding, the Guardian project operates under a tier system. And I guess, could you explain this and how it works for anyone who might be unfamiliar?
Well, I think Andrew and I both hold that there's more or less one dynamic that's sort of expressed in two ways that enables people to be so cruel online. It's generally anonymity. The anonymity of the person making the attacks and the anonymity of the person being attacked makes it safe for the attacker because they can disappear into the mob, and for the person being attacked, they're an abstraction. They're a handle. They're whatever whatever the attacker decides to substitute for who that real person is,
Yeah.
and attack, and so. The show is about exposing the people who are attacking them and connecting them with their victims to see what can result from actually seeing the person face to face and confronting the fact that they're a human being just like you, with hopes, wishes, and dreams and values, and that you've done something extremely consequential in their life. On another level, I think it's about organizing a support group to help people who've been the victims of this kind of unjust and what should be criminal actions by organizing counseling and places where they can vent and write and express themselves and be supported by a community of like-minded folks, and maybe even folks who can help them move on and pick up the pieces and live a productive life again. And then there's the aspect of, I think, legal reform, which is trying to bring the laws up to date with the communication with the communication technology. We don't think that victims have the capacity to stand up for themselves and be supported by the legal system at the moment. If anything, the legal system seems to work against them, and that serves as a deterrent for people seeking justice, and it serves as an incentive for people wanting to abuse people. What do you think, Andrew?
No, I agree. I think the way our legal system is set up right now for these types of um, cases is very unfriendly. It's
Mm.
costly. Most people don't have the financial capability to file, a lawsuit. Anybody right now. I mean, we could all file a complaint right now. The problem is covering the filing fees and the enormous amounts of hearings and then discovery to be able to say, okay, where's all the proof? Where is this happening? Right? There's a lot of costs associated with it, which, as Mark said, is often a deterrent to people wanting to use the legal system as a support. Sorry for the stuttering, as a support system.
Mm.
So I think in this aspect where we're able or hope to provide this network, this roundtable of people who can guide, advise, connect, outsource, to others, it's going to be a lot easier up and until states really start to hone in on these laws, right? Every state has some form of an electronic harassment law, but it's a slap on the wrist. Okay, there's nothing really behind it. And what we're seeing now are states like Maryland and New York and California that are saying, look, this is a problem, and there
Mm.
needs to be a criminal aspect to these laws, or they just need to be rewritten entirely to incorporate our social media in today's digital age. And I think what we're trying to do is make that even more known, get people to understand that cyberbullying is a crime. Words do kill, words do hurt. And the sticks and stones framework that we've all grown up with needs to go away.
Right. And I guess obviously with the quarantine time we're living in, there'd be more reliance on something like social media now more than ever before. So how timely do you think the Guardian project is in this current time?
Well, I
Very.
mean, very. It's not just the pandemic that's making people more dependent on social media. It's also extreme partisanship and tribalism out there in the
Mm.
world. And there's no bridge between the contending tribes, and there's no attempt to bridge the gap between the contending tribes. They've each they've each labeled each other as evil and do their best to screed the other to death. So I think learning how to and I'm learning this too, by the way. I used to approach bullies in a very different way than I'm learning to approach them now,
Mm.
especially with respect to the way aggression expresses itself on social media. It's relational aggression. It's not physical aggression. And that's a very different, you have to deal with that kind of thing very differently than you deal with physical aggression. Um, but the atmosphere today, the hypercontention, the conflation of words with violence in many respects makes real discourse often impossible. So I think the Guardians can step into this crazy sort of civil war that we're in the midst of, and perhaps be a beacon of reason for people who choose to follow it.
There's a lot
Yeah.
of hate going on, Connor. There's a lot of hate in the
Mm.
U.S. right now, and even as we're speaking, election coverage is going on, and we all really walk on eggshells online. It doesn't matter what anybody says, you're going to offend somebody, even if that's not even your intention, even on your mind. Somebody's going to be offended. Why? Because there's very little emotion that can be detected simply by typing words, absent recording a video or doing a live stream. You can't gauge what the other person is thinking, how they're presenting it, their demeanor. So having a network that Mark has helped build with the Guardians, before I even came along,
Mm.
really sets the framework for what happens if you are misunderstood in a tweet or a Facebook post. You will have people that know you in so many aspects that will defend you, that can help clarify and help provide context to those who are willing to receive it. And Mark, I forget the quote by Stephen Covey. I know it. I don't want to botch it up, but it's what it's
Seek first to understand, then be understood.
right. And that
But
that go ahead.
I mean, I have to say I've been guilty of some of these sins in the past, where you simply pass on a piece of information without doing your own due diligence, and that's how a lot of these false narratives get real purchase and become
Mm.
viral. Is they appeal on a superficial level. You may have an intuitive or base level dislike for the person because of things you've heard, and so it's easy for you to pass on that information without checking and without considering the consequences that has. And this isn't about necessarily holding social media platforms accountable, for what they do. It's about individuals holding each other accountable for what they do. And it's about inspiring personal accountability in the things that you pass on, in the things that you say, understanding that somebody's reputation is the equivalent of their life. Without their reputation, they have no life. There are
Mm.
some religions that believe, trashing somebody's reputation unjustly is an act of murder, and it is an equivalent to that. And so it should be treated as a crime.
Right. And I guess you were kind of mentioning this there at the end of that answer, but from what you've seen, how do you think false narratives could have an impact on someone's real life? Or with
Well, for me, for
libel and
example,
slander?
there were multiple false narratives circulating around me, and they kept circulating irrespective of all the proofs that were produced in defiance of the false narratives, in spite of podcasts and other things that I did, taking each false narrative on its own merits and completely disproving them. It persisted. It persisted to the point where a number of enraged fans started a change.org petition to get me fired from every single job that I have. Now, my fans started a counter change.org position that well outnumbered theirs. And theirs, the commentary section in theirs was so mean-spirited and vile that eventually change.org dropped their petition. But still, that exists. Somewhere out there in cyberspace, the fact that a number of 1,400 people wanted me canned from my jobs because they didn't feel safe around me. Because, you know, they'd heard through somebody who heard through somebody who heard through somebody who heard through somebody who heard through somebody else down the chain of telephone lines that is social media, that I was this kind of person. They didn't check it out for themselves. They just immediately adopted it. And there's more than just they might have a vague notion of who I am, disagree with the things that I believe in, and have a sense of dislike and then pass it on for that. There's also another almost more insidious element to this social media bullying, which is there's groups of people that band together and get their identities and self-esteem from destroying people and destroying check marks in particular. And so they gain popularity by gaming this viciousness and by engaging check marks and hoping that the check mark engages them back. And then they get praise, they get affirmation, they get cachet within their group, they get status, and they feel like they belong to something and they're doing something meaningful. To them, the destruction of something bigger than them gives them power. So there's that sick element to this too. And I think that sick element is larger than we'd like to believe.
And
I guess from, sorry, go on, Andrew.
No, please. I was just going to say, I agree with everything Mark said.
Of course. And but I was going to say, to kind of tie in some of Mark's acting work, obviously you're recently in 13 Reasons Why, and cyberbullying and false narratives were a component of that show, a major component. And while the story being told was fictitious, do you think something like the Guardian Project could have helped that situation at all?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's what the community eventually ended up doing, was banding around the victims and helping themselves. And because they understood that what they say has a tremendous impact on somebody, and you're responsible for that. You know, I don't want to imply the wrong thing by this, but you know, any tool that we have, including language, can be used for ill. And so you have to be very responsible and rational about the way you use any tool, right? And people are not being responsible about the way they use the tool of their own language and the way they use the tool of the internet, which is a great way of connecting people, a really great way. You get to meet people from all over the world and integrate with people from different cultures and different backgrounds. You have now, for the first time in human history, the world is this big. We can literally access just about any kind of information, and yet we're deliberately using social media to be parochial, to close ourselves off in these little communities and not let any new information influence us.
And that's just it. Is, you know, the internet, as you said, Mark, is a great tool. Social media isn't bad. It's not evil. It's no different than that old expression with, you know, with guns. Guns don't kill people. People kill people. It's how these tools are being used. So when somebody is choosing to weaponize social media, to use it in a way that it was not intended to be used, and to exploit it for its, quote, flaws, which in this case is the open nature of that internet, the anonymity, that's where problems ensue. And that's why, you know, it's not necessarily the platforms that need to be held accountable to some extent on their end for the reporting mechanisms that they have. Sure, but that's why it's up to users like you and I to hold each other accountable, hold ourselves accountable, and understand that coming onto these platforms is a privilege. And by doing so, you have to give up certain privacy rights. That includes your name, your identity, right? Because you're entering a world much bigger than yourself, in a world that I think all of us are still trying to understand. You know, Congress is still trying to understand it by having these hearings, but it's about holding users accountable, and you do so by educating. We hope by humanizing this and by exposing this type of behavior, that's the right pathway to do it.
Right. And I guess also tying back to something that Mark mentioned earlier on, which was how kind of fans had false perceptions of you online. And do you think playing characters like Lucifer, like villains on shows like that, had any effect on why that might have happened?
I think it contributes to it in a way. It certainly gives people even an unconscious preconceived notion about the type of person I am. But I also didn't help matters in the sense that I was provocative. I was deliberately provocative. Now I never, I was only tough on people who were abusing me, who started attacking me. But I believed in the old school way of bullying, which is the bully comes up and tries to abuse you, you punch them in the face, and they usually stop. But with this form of aggression, this relational aggression, it doesn't work that way. It's actually like pouring gasoline on a fire, or cutting yourself in a tank full of sharks. They just all sort of swarm you at once, and you really can't fight them, because I mean, the overall intent and purpose of the leaders of these little bands of people is power, and that form of relational violence and aggression, it's easier to acquire power that way. And so I do think it contributed to their preconceptions of me, but in the end, I fought. You know, I'm not used to not fighting. If you mess with me, I'm gonna I'll fight back with you. And so that gave them plenty of stuff to decontextualize and then claim a narrative, like build a narrative around a decontextualized tweet. One of the more famous ones they like to use, Andrew, you'll appreciate this, because this was before I learned to link my tweets together. So I was in a thread, but I wasn't linking my tweets together properly. So I literally had a 14 tweet thread defending innocent Muslims from Islamist terror. And in response to a question where my critique of Islamism was taken as a critique of Muslims in general, I said, not all Muslims are terrorists. Clearly, this shouldn't even be an issue. We shouldn't even be talking about this. Well, because I didn't tread my tweets together correctly, the not was in the tweet above the all Muslims are terrorists. And they've been able to take that, despite multiple, the tweets have already been threaded together by Guardians. Yeah. They're photographed, they're put in there, and people can see them if they actually want to research it. But people just don't. They're like, this son of a bitch, look at that, what he said. Now, I mean, even on its face, for the most despicable anti-religionist or bigot on the planet, I can't imagine them saying something like that in public. Because it's just so dumb. So but it was actually a defense. It was actually trying to throw out the common what's the word I want to use? The talking point that everybody throws out to avoid criticism of a particular religion. Well, it's on the table. It's in society. It deserves to be critiqued. Everything in society deserves to be critiqued. Debate is how we get to the truth as people. And there is nothing too sacred to be talked about. Nothing. So, and the more open the communication, the healthier we are as a society. Now that we have all these compartments closing on each other, we're becoming an extremely neurotic, hypersensitized, PTSD-ridden culture that's that's aggressive and defensive and ready to attack at a moment's notice. I mean, that words can be triggers now, that a word can be a trigger, is a frightening concept. And it goes against psychology. Cognitive behavioral psychology isn't about avoiding triggers. It's not about compartmentalizing information and not letting yourself face discomfort. It's the opposite. You face the trigger and you wrap your brain cognitively around it so that you can overcome it. You face the thing that's making you uncomfortable and see if you're in error or the other person's in error. Why? Because it's epistemologically good to know what's true. It's good for your brain. It's good for your mental health. It's good for your self-esteem. This other stuff, this parochial way of looking at the world, this embedding yourself in small little minute communities that can't stand hearing any information outside their little bubble, is making us sick.
It's neurotic thinking that lends favor to the inability to think for oneself. And it's led to a blame culture that nobody wants to do the work. And to use Mark's example, to go and say, well, what was the context of that statement? Let me look above. Or maybe it was in response to a tweet, or hell, maybe it was just a grammatical error and somebody hit the send button too soon and it broke up the text. You know, there's so many factors that we all do. And unfortunately, people are just judging each other by, well, you shouldn't have had to defend yourself in the first place, but if you are defending yourself, you have to be careful how you defend yourself. When your reputation's on the line, when your name is on the line, you need to do whatever you need to do to protect yourself, assuming you're staying within legal bounds, not harming another, you would think not harming another person. But even then, it's these trolling communities, individuals feel that there should now be rules on how to properly defend yourself. It's not fair.
And I'm sure the rules favor them.
Always, the rules always, it's a one-sided game that no matter what you do, you're gonna lose. And it is a feeling that it creates isolation, and isolation is a very dangerous demon to somebody who feels overpowered and doesn't know how to ask for help. And unfortunately, it does lead people to killing themselves, to harming themselves.
Right. I think this culture, this bully culture that's becoming an epidemic on social media is normalizing neurosis. It's normalizing it.
Not good.
Yeah. I mean, obviously just taking in everything that you just said, but assuming for some people that this discussion might be the first time they've heard of the Guardian Project and they want to find more information, where could they look?
Sure. You can find us on Facebook. It's The Guardian Project. Twitter is @GuardianProj, PROJ. Instagram, it's I think it's the Guardian Project or Official Guardian Project. Very
I think it's
easy
the Guardian
to find.
Project Official. Yeah.
Guardian Project Official, but probably the easiest out of all of that is to go follow Mark on social media, and he links out to the Guardian Project, which will take you to our Kickstarter, which is live right now.
Right. And this is actually the last question I've got here. And everyone I've spoken to since the pandemic started, I've asked a version of this question, and maybe considering what you guys are talking about might be the most relevant for you. But with the time we're all living in, what advice would you give to people who might be struggling kind of during the pandemic?
You want to take that first?
Sure. Don't be afraid to ask for help. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to reach out to a family member. If you're not comfortable with reaching out to family, or you can't, reach out to a friend. If not a friend, reach out to us, reach out to anyone. You know, we try to be better, to do better. And I think the biggest problem is with people is they feel alone. And it's not tattling, it's not ratting somebody out, it's taking control over your emotions, taking responsibility over your mental health, protecting yourself. And if that means reaching out to somebody like Mark or myself, and we can direct you to to somebody or even help you in a certain way, that speaks miles. And I don't have nearly the following or community that Mark does, but whenever I get messages from people that I've never met, even this morning, I will always take the time to respond, because I remember when I first started in my career, and I hated that people thought that they were too good or too busy to reach out. So I try to do better and to be better. So ask for help, reach out.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm going to echo those sentiments too. I think these times are almost designed to isolate us and make us feel alone. And we're social beings. We need to interact with other humans, and don't be afraid to reach out to someone and say you need some help. It's okay. It's okay.